Before we start the video, I'd just like to say this video covers spoilers for Predator Badlands and maybe other topics in the Predator and Alien franchise, so before you watch this video, watch the movie. Predator Badlands is an amazing movie. Everything from the set pieces to the action to the characters is top notch, and was probably the best movie I saw last year. But one thing really stood out to me in the movie, and that was the main character, Dek. And you might not have seen him before because he is a completely new entry into the franchise. But I personally think this is such a good thing for the Predator franchise because we all know the Predator as a bloodthirsty hunter that doesn't care about his victims. And they kind of turn him into a more careful and new hunter. And obviously some people didn't like that. Some people just like their predators as heartless hunters. But honestly, I really didn't mind it. I thought it was definitely a fresh take on the Predator franchise, which is what we need. And not to say, these movies have been doing really good in the box office and critics-wise. Because this movie has an 85%, I'm pretty sure, on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it made about 200 million at the box office. Which maybe doesn't sound like a lot when it comes to like Marvel standards and Star Wars standards. I mean, fair, they haven't been doing too great either, but this is really good for the franchise. Because there are definitely two sides to the argument about how Disney buying 20th Century Fox is a bad idea for the Predator franchise. One, saying they're going to tone the franchise down when it comes to the violence and all that, but honestly, Predator Badlands is a really kind of gory movie, but it just doesn't have any humans in it, so they can get away with a PG-13 rating. And then there's the other side, which is the side I'm personally on, is that Disney could help branch out the franchise of the Predator. Because Disney makes a lot of crap, like a lot of crap, so they probably could get away with making almost maybe 1 to 2 every couple of years. And who doesn't want more Predator? It's a cool thing. So I think the Disney deal kind of saved Predator, if I'm honest with you. And not to mention Dan Trachtenberg making the past 3 Predator movies, and all have been amazing movies. But we do know there is bad news to cover, including the worst studio of all time. Paramount has a record of ruining every movie franchise of recent years. When it comes to the deal, we don't exactly know why he's doing this or the outcome of it, but we're pretty sure that this means that Dan Trachtenberg is going to basically work for Paramount and probably pause on making Predator movies of his own. Which is scary because it seems that Dan Trachtenberg is so good with this franchise, and we don't know if any other director can handle what he's done the past couple of years and made this franchise so much better. So I guess all we can do is just hope that Paramount handles this in the best way possible. Wow, that was a long yap session. Anyway, on to Dek. I believe the way they introduced Dek is one of the best ways to introduce a new character into a franchise that is already many movies deep. Because he is a weak predator, he's the runt of the litter. And Dek's father doesn't believe in weak hunters, so he decides to kill him. And he chooses Dek's own brother, Qui, to do the sacrifice. But Dek's brother backs out of it and saves Dek, causing the death of him, by slicing off both his arms and cutting off his head as a trophy for his father, presumably. And Dek, being a new hunter, doesn't know what to do in the situation and he fled, which causes him to crash land onto the island where he has to fight for his own survival. And I think this is such a good premise because it puts the Predator in a world he isn't familiar in and he has to adapt to the surroundings, and also, the monster designs are sick. And this leads to an almost Dutch-esque scene where he's setting out his weapons and testing out everything he has, and I think that's just a really neat detail. And another scene I think is really great for Dek is his fight with the Kalisk. The Kalisk is a beast that can regrow limbs and basically is invulnerable. And I think this leads to some really good character building with Dek because it shows that he has fear and isn't fearless like many other hunters in the species. But instead of somehow killing it, Dek manages to tame the Kalisk and meets its mother, which you find out later in the movie to be Bud. Bud is a baby Kalisk that Dek takes along his journey and is also basically the main source of marketing for the movie. Yes, make sure to sell more of those buds. But while Dek is fighting the Kalisk, Thea's sister, Tessa, extracts the Kalisk and takes him to their base. This then leads to a whole scene where Elle Fanning's character has to pretend, to be Tessa and, has to free the Kalisk so he can take down Tessa. Because Tessa is actually evil and is wanting to use the Kalisk's power for bad. Dek and Thea and Bud manage to defeat Tessa with the help of the creatures around him, which I thought was a really cool scene with how, Dek uses his surroundings to his advantage like a predator would. And After they defeat Tessa, Dec goes back to his father's lair and they have one last fight, and basically Dec manages to overcome him, and he basically says that he doesn't need him anymore. He says he has his own clan, and then Bud comes and eats his head off. It's a pretty cool scene. And there is also a reveal that Dec has a mother, and it's in the end of the movie where a spaceship basically comes down and Dec says, "Is my mother," which is obviously, the plan for the sequel, which I really hope we get, at least 2028. I really, really do hope we get a sequel for this movie, considering the Paramount deal, which I am quite worried about. But at the end of the day, the plot revolves around Dec, and it is a classic fish out of water story, which I know we've seen many times before, but I think it's just done so well with the fact that it's kind of not just Dec being in awe of what he's seeing, I mean, obviously there's some really nice set pieces, because they filmed it in, it was either Wales or Greenland, which is kind of crazy, because considering the mountain ranges and all that, and not just being CGI. Not to mention the monster designs in the movie are great, considering the rhino scene. Well, it's basically a monster that looks like a rhino, but it kind of has like a hard exterior, and it's in a scene where Dec has to make his way through the trees and not fall onto blades of glass. Literally, blades of glass. And also, I do really like Elle Fanning's character, Thea. I think she, also has great character growth, realising that, because all she wants to do, basically, in the movie is find her sister and hopefully reunite with her in a positive way. But, Tessa, Thea's sister, is actually the bad guy, or woman. And she basically has to overcome the fact that, she's not a good person and has to, kill her. Also, I forgot to mention, they're not actually humans in this movie, but like I said, there's no humans, that's why it was given the PG-13 rating. I think there's something called synths, and basically they're very much like human, and they're actually made by the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, which is from Alien, so it's basically kind of a crossover type thing, and they're linking the two universes together, which I think is really cool as well. Because something I've noticed is that Dan Trachtenberg really seems to be a sucker for kind of connecting things together, because at the end of Predator Kill of Killers, the animated movie, there's a scene where there's a bunch of characters from previous Predator movies in test tubes, such as the main character from Prey and even Dutch. Which basically means that hopefully all of these things are kind of going to tie together into an almost like Endgame style movie, which would be awesome to see. Considering that's never really happened in the franchise before, where we have multiple links to other things. We've obviously had Alien vs Predator, duh. So they've kind of linked things before with Alien, and I think it's kind of a thing to how they're rejoicing, and I'm so excited to see anything that comes from the future of the franchise. Anyways, that was my kind of analysis on Dec and Predator Badlands. I hope you really enjoyed it. See you later. Bye.